temporarily got the technical. Okay, let's get started. Let's call this meeting to order of the Engineering Committee. Today is Tuesday, January the 11th, 2022. And roll call, Roberts present.
Bowman present.
Thank you very much. Jessica, do we have any public comments for this evening? Okay, thank you very much. All righty, item number C, approval of November 9th, 2021 minutes. Any corrections, questions, anything of that nature with these minutes? Chuck? No? Okay, then the minutes are approved as such. Thank you. Okay, moving along nicely here. Item number D, Sandia Creek Drive and Via Vaquero Road Culvert Repair Project. Mr. Hunt?
Thank you. Jessica, do you have my PowerPoint?
Sorry?
Is it, I emailed you a PowerPoint. Do you have it?
I do not.
Let's see if I can share.
I do not. I apologize.
Oh,
I think I can get it. Does everybody see that now?
There we go.
yeah.
Yes.
All right, let me just put it in presenter mode.
Invite Ron.
Yeah, good old technical Ron can take care of it.
I'm glad my internet's been having trouble, so it's actually working for me now. So hopefully nothing comes up.
All right, go to the next slide, Ron.
Oh, there.
Okay, I know that some of you went out and looked at the site. I believe all of you did at the very beginning. I just kind of wanted to run through a kind of a series of what Sandia Creek looks like. This was at the very beginning after they dug the hole out, removed the road, dug the hole and put all the pipes in and you can see that that line that goes across is being supported is the water district line that's in there. And you can see all five of the big 60-inch CMP culverts. Okay, go to the next one. They did a big push to get the pipes in and with enough backfill in there before the rains came. And this was their big push. We told them they could leave the other old pipes in there and pick them out later. Their goal was just to get enough dirt in there and this, so when the rain came, they could be protected and everything. So you can say they, just before the rain came, they had all this kind of buried down there and was working great. Go to the next slide, please. And during the rain, the prep, they covered the slopes. You can see the road's wet. This was taken during one of the first storms. Go to the next slide. This is the upstream end. They had a pond on the, where'd you go, Ron?
Sorry about that.
You moved your mouse. They put a little berm just ahead of the culvert to create a pond area, and they had a pump in there. And when the rain had exceeded that, then it went over the plastic and into the pipes and on through. Go to the next one. They did with working on the head walls, the concrete head walls in there. This is actually in between some of the storms that's out there. Go to the next slide. And right now, this week, when the rains came, we had like 2 weeks of rain, and they had to wait another 2 weeks for everything to kind of dry out before they could put the head wall in on the downstream side. So this is what's going on this week down in there. You can kind of see they're putting up the wood framework, and then they'll be pouring concrete and all that. I believe this was taken, Ron, yesterday. So
I believe it's the downstream one. I know the upstream one was placed all before the rainstorm.
yeah, but this is the downstream one here. So this was taken. So they're out there working on it again after it dried out enough so they could get in there. So anyway, that's what's going on with Via Vaqueros. Go
No,
to
that's
the,
Sandia Creek, Dave,
Sandia
sorry.
Creek. Go to the next slide. This week on, they started opening, not taking all the asphalt off and started exposing on Via Vaqueros. So it's actually closed this week. And then it's gonna open up next week with a one way in each direction. Go to the next slide.
All right.
Okay. We'll come back to that later. So anyway, on Sandia Creek and Via Vaqueros, there's the current status of that. Let's see, go back. Sandia Creek was going to be done in 6 weeks. You know, we had off and on rain for 2 weeks. We give them rain delays for that. And if they can't work in there, like put the head wall up for 2 weeks to let it dry out, we gave them another 2 weeks for that. So that extends that out to instead of middle of January, we're going to be middle of February, depending on the rain. If there's any further rain out there, then that could slow that down again. Luckily, we've had some really nice weather. They talk about a few drizzles. Drizzles don't really affect us a whole lot, but if it's going to rain like an inch of rain, it does create some issues in working. And then Via Vaqueros, that'll be done in approximately the same time, middle of February. So if everything goes well, they both will be opened up completely. But next week, Via Vaqueros open up in one lane with a flagman out there to keep everybody safe and keep traffic flowing. And with that, do I have any questions from anybody on those 2 projects?
I have a few questions. Getting a lot of comments from people.
I can't hear you, Jim.
Yeah, there's a big echo.
They seem to believe that this project was supposed to have been completed about a week from now. And I'm not sure where that came from, but the question is going to come up. Are we operating under the schedule that was originally in the bid specifications? Or what schedule is this that we're operating?
They're within our time frame of the contract that we gave them. Because we do, in the contract, we give them so many days to work on their project, plus they get any additional rain delays automatically added on top of that.
So the kickoff date, do you know what that was right offhand?
It was like November 29th.
Okay, I remember. Okay.
So basically it was the first week of December. You know,
Right,
but
right. And
the
then,
November 29th is,
if
they
we,
started.
count the days forward. and
Jim,
there
could
had
you
been
turn your
no-
mic on?
No,
Sorry, I'm just fixing the sound.
yeah, okay, okay. So if it started the 29th of November, if we had no rain and no approved delay, that would have come out, what, mid-January?
Mid-January, yes.
Without his.
We're having some technical issues, so if everybody can hold on for just a moment or two.
Yeah, that's good, because I could barely hear him through, actually, I think his voice was coming through your mic. Because his is turned off. Ron, do you recall how many total days of construction we gave them on the two projects?
So it's 60 working days total, but again, working days are just weekdays and not
Yeah.
holiday, of course, and not rain days.
So that's like a little over 11 weeks total.
This,
So we gave them almost 3 months total.
Correct.
I'll just. In the meeting.
Oh, but Dave Hunt, where we were talking about Via Vaquero Road. Jim had some questions about when we started, which was 11/29 of last year.
can I ask a question? I mean,
We can hear you. We can hear you, Jim. At least I
you
can.
can't hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay, so here's the question. Assuming that they had begun on November 29th and there were no rain delays or any other delays, what would have been the end date?
Okay, we gave them 12 weeks, 3 months to do the whole project. So December, January, February, end of February.
Okay. So are we on track right now, time-wise?
We are actually on track because they moved so fast at the very beginning to get a bunch of work done before the rain came. They were actually, even with the delay, they are still on track. As long as it doesn't rain anymore. We might get a few more days of rain, but we have actually, there's 2 weeks. They're still saying right now they're going to close 2 weeks ahead of the schedule, even with the rain. So
With the rain that's already occurred.
well, yeah, even accounting for that, they're still 2 weeks ahead of what's in the specifications. So
Okay.
they're
And
doing
these
a good,
specifications were what was adopted by the board originally,
correct.
way back 2 years ago. These were
Yes.
what would have been the
Yes.
specifications put out for bid, and then the subsequent contract, which
Correct.
that was all in place at that time, right? When we went out to bid on this?
That was all part of the specifications that we put together with your boilerplate. And in there, we add in a construction timeframe that we feel is justified for the type of project and how much work is being done.
Was it
So
our time frame or the contractors?
it was ours. It was Ron's and staff came up with the quantities and what time and how long that it should take to construct a project based upon all the other projects that we've been working on over the years.
And that was in the contract originally.
Correct.
So there hasn't been any giving the contractor more time or preferential service or treatment or anything like that. It goes back to before we even knew who the contractor was going to be, correct?
Correct. But by what's in the specification is we do give them rain days because if it rained, they can't work. They will still finish underneath the time frame, but they are still allowed extra days just because of the rain. But we haven't given them anything above and beyond anything other than rain days, and they really don't need it. They're finish their job within the time frame that was in the specifications.
And if there hadn't been rain days, which there have been, but if there had not been, then based on where they are today, they would be ahead of schedule.
Yeah, they'd have they would actually be done with Sandia Creek by now, and And then they would have started Via Vaqueros at the same time, but still been done early.
Why, why did they do that in separate projects? The comments that I've heard are, well, they could have just done Sandia Creek and we'd have been done by now and the road would have been open and off the detour. What do we say about that?
Well, when we started the job, all they worked on was Sandia Creek, period. Until this week. And so, and the crew that's out there working on Sandia Creek is the concrete crew. Well, on Via Vaqueros, it's the dirt crew and the placing the pipe crew. It's a different set of people. They have different crews that do different specialties. So they haven't spent any extra time on Via Vaqueros that would even affect Sandia Creek. So the only thing that affected Sandia Creek is we had 2 weeks of rain plus a 2-week dry out period so we get the concrete in there. That's all. There's no favoritism. They didn't take crews off of one job to put it on another. None of that is going on.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, when they're
Okay,
probably
those are the kind of questions I've heard, so.
yeah, and when they're probably getting close to being done, they'll pave it all at once because the 2 jobs will line up so that they'll have 1 day of paving out there to do both jobs at the same time.
That's my question.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, thank you, Dave. Let's move on then to Buena Vista. Also,
Okay, Debbie, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Okay, let's move on then to Buena Vista. Mr. Hunt?
Okay, I'm gonna let Ron kind of give an update on that. He's got the background on all that. So Ron, why don't you take it from here?
Everybody can hear me. So, yeah, but Buena Vista, it's still in the environmental permitting stage. And right now we're working with all of the agencies. And, it's been difficult. We've gotten comments from all of them, but it's hard to get everyone on the same page. And it's one report that goes in. So we are working with them. There's online applications being completed for everything and just getting all the permitting agencies on the same page here. It's difficult, especially with everything that's going on with COVID. It also adds further delays. So we are working through that right now. We've had comments from both the CDFW and the Regional Water Board at this time. So they have all seen the packages, and I know it's been a long process, but we're still working through with them. They're sending us, little comments here and there, trying to get everything wrapped up. But, once we get all this into them, we went through the same initial phase with Sandia Creek, and it is tiresome and there's a lot of work, but going through all this initial phase and initial coordination with them, it helped to actually expedite the timeline once we got it in. So that's what we're working through right now. We're working on finishing all that. We plan on having the CDFW application actually wrapped up this week. Getting all that paid and back and into them. So that'll get the clock ticking on their end. But again, it's more coordination items now and just handling all their comments before it goes in so that we know that what we submit to them is going to be a perfect product basically, and take a lot less review time if we do that. That's basically the big, we haven't had any setbacks as far as the ultimate timeline. There's of course comments coming back and forth, but the ultimate timeline, everything's still on the same phase, which I believe we were talking about springtime. So that's mostly it.
Okay.
It's just dealing with the environmental permitting.
Okay, any questions? Bill?
No.
Anything? Okay, thank you, Ron. Okay,
Thank you.
moving on, future roadway projects, Mr. Hunt?
Okay, Ron, I want to bring that PowerPoint back up.
All right, let me find it on my screen here. Share screen, screen 2. All right, you see that, right?
Yep, right there.
Put it on patient mode. All right, all yours, Dave.
Okay, this is mainly for Charles, who hasn't been through this process with us before, but Debbie has. What I'm showing you is map. And I'll make sure, Charles, you get a copy of this, you know, a hard copy in your hand so you can see it. And this shows all the different projects that we've done in the last few years, from slurry sealing to striping. And this was for 2018 and also through 2020 in the areas that we did. Then last year, we had a bunch of projects that we had listed, and we chose to do Buena Vista, which, as you just heard from Ron's in the stage, and that'll hopefully be constructed this spring. So every year we come up with a list of items. We kind of present it to the board. So to the committee. What I'm trying to do is just get you kind of thinking about it again. Kind of a refresher course on what we did before and maybe what we need to do in the future. And then you guys think about it. We can have a more discussion after we get some impact from both Debbie and Charles, the next meeting, and when we want to go forward with this and what project we may want to take to the board that's on there. If you go to the next slide. These are just some of the projects that we've had on the books that we've all been talking about in the past. You know, we said when we finished Sandia Creek, one of the main things we were going to do is help slurry seal the road for the detour of Sandia Creek. We put a bunch of extra traffic on there, and so that was a project that we have out there. We don't have a price tag on that yet. We'll be working on that just to kind of get what we need to do. Another item was, we did a bunch of slurry seals the last couple of years. We have some streets left over that have not been done. So that's something that we could do, is finishing up the slurry seal project for the rest of the community. Another one was it's time to update the project management study. And that's the one that came up with all our different roads and how they rate them. If they're good, they're poor, if they need a slurry seal, or do they need an overlay, or just total reconstruction. So it's been a while. It's typically the cities do these every 2 to 5 years. This one's been done beyond that. The public works crew out there found a storm drain, a CMP culvert at Via Ficaro and Via Yerba. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. And they said it's rusted and starting to cave in a little bit out there. So that's maybe a project that we can look at also. We've done some preliminary cost estimates on that. And that's in the ballpark of, $200,000 to $250,000, because it's 3 culverts, 10 to 15 feet in the ground. It's going to be a big job opening that up and closing it and to fix it. You can't. The crew out there said it's not one that will help you. You can't line it. It's caving in. It's going to need some repairs. Whether it can last a year or two, we'll look at that further. We also had on the books some street improvement projects that was started before I got here. And that was on Via Ficaro Street. And we did projects 1, 2, 3, and 3A. And so we have 3B, 4, and actually there's a 5th reach in there. And we have 3B designed. 4 is not, but that was a project we were talking about coming up with to finish in there, to do them there. So in the past, we spent anywhere from $500,000 to $725,000, $750 per year on these projects. So it's just something for everyone to start thinking about and go through the, if there's any projects out there that you think is a must, next month, we're going to kind of have an open discussion about it. And we can go through and look at everything and discuss how we want to proceed. So it's kind of just a general overview. We're not expecting a whole lot of feedback from you guys on this today, unless you want to. So with that, I will turn it over back to you, Debbie. You have any questions?
None for me, Jim?
I may be able to expand on a few of these,
Okay.
just to give you a little background information. The first one we've talked about before. I just want to make sure that you realize it's the same thing. Previous boards have basically made a commitment to the people on the detour roads
Mhm.
that after the project on Sandia Creek and Via Vaquero is completed, that they'll make their roads good. And
Okay.
to be honest, and I think everybody knows this, so I can say it here, the roads on the detour route took a little bit more of a beating than we expected. And so that doesn't mean that we can get, it doesn't affect our commitment, except the dollars it's going to take to make that commitment. So I had some dollar figures in mind, and I'm almost, 50% more thinking, that. So anyway, I just want you to know, one, that's the project. And the thought was they would come out of next year's 2022
Mhm.
budget for roadway rehab.
Mhm.
And hang on to your seat when they bring in the price, because it's going to be higher than I kind of
Then
thought.
we had anticipated.
So I'm
Okay.
guessing it probably have to spend 250 to 300,000 probably.
Think so?
And that's because they didn't get slurried or restriped either. We probably are going to need to do a repair. We're going to have to dig out a lot of area, rebuild those bad sections of the road. And then we're going to need to put a slurry over the whole thing and new striping for them. And while we're at it, since we're going to have a slurry crew out there, probably finish off all the areas that didn't get slurried in the last 2 years and just be done with that.
Okay.
But I don't think that's still going to take all your money. And I'm hoping I'm going to have some gas tax money for you by then too, but that remains to be seen. But I wanted to just give you a little background as I know it on Via Vaquero, these rehab projects 3B and 4.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, the boards at the time in the engineering committee and the staff, it's all changed now, but they looked at the map like what Ron or Dave showed you, and they said, okay, so how are we going to spend this $750,000 a year on roadway rehab? And can we maybe make a 5-year plan or something like that? And I think it was a 5-year. So they looked at everything as it was known at the time, and they decided they were going to, one, pick a primary, okay, and two, the primary they picked was Via Vaquero. And I heard that the reason was because it cut through all the zones, a lot of zones, kind of crossed completely across the district, and so, and then its shape, the shape of the road was such that it probably would be best to do it, first.
Okay.
So they designed it in I believe it was 5-year increments, but then they stretched it because they didn't have enough money when they went out to bid. So they got year 1, year 2, and then 3, I believe they had to cut in half, made it 3A and B, and then 4. So that's where they got stopped. And then Sandia Creek washed out, Via Vaquero washed out, all the washouts. So that stopped everything. And that was about the time I came here. So I'm telling you what was told to me.
Okay.
And now Dave, I remember when Dave started, he and I went out and drove Via Vaquero, looked at the different projects, and they were overlays where they put 3 inches of asphalt down. So Via Vaquero, that section of it is in good shape asphalt wise and will be good for 20 years or whatever. And so kind of it's been assumed that we would just keep going because of a couple of the designs are pretty much complete.
Mhm.
But you're not bound by that. So I'm just giving you that history as it was given to me.
Okay.
And so that's what that's all about. And in the middle, it talks about pavement management study.
Mhm.
If you remember, just the year before I came, they did it was called Paver. And that's where the truck came out and drove the roads and took pictures and soundings and all this and gave us a projection of what the life of the road was.
Mhm.
And that's where that $18 million in pavement work came from. So it's probably time to rethink this paver thing because they'll come out and run it again.
Uh-huh.
And or you don't have to be that sophisticated. For a little district, that's highly sophisticated, you know, and bigger cities and stuff do that kind of thing. The county of Riverside does it. So anyway, we need to get into that whole thing. It's time to look at updating our study. So that's kind of what that's about. Dave, are you still there?
Still here?
Did I cover that accurately?
Yes, you did.
Okay, so that's all I can add to it, but as he was speaking, these were thoughts I had add
Okay.
to it.
Appreciate the comments, Jim. That's the direction I was actually gonna go with some questions as to what the plan had been, where are we now, and where are we going in the future with it.
Okay, all
Try
right,
to tie that into a budget that tracks along with that.
right.
And one of the things that would help me a great deal, if we have a archive of presentations, I'd like to look back a year or so and see what the progress has been along where we thought we were going to go
Mhm.
from that point in time. And then it would be really helpful to have a tool like the map, which perhaps you've used on each of the presentations. That's a very good tool to me to look
Right,
at and
right.
get a scale of where we are. But what is missing right now may be a little bit of the history that goes with it. And I don't know how complete that map is as to all of the roads in the district, whether there's work that needs to be done that doesn't show up on the map because it wasn't a part of a previous plan, perhaps. Or
Right.
so for me to get on board and track, I'd like to be able to see some of that on a recurring basis. So we look at the map in each of these. We see where we said we were going to be, where we are, where we might have deviated from that. And I know that's likely what you've been doing in the past.
Yeah.
But to have access to the presentation before we actually end up here in the room would be very helpful for me as well, so that I can better prepare to
Mhm.
make a comment or review.
I think this is kind of leading up to this process that we go through every year. But I think we need to make our next agenda be a little more or a lot more comprehensive on what you're talking about. So we need to take our planning, which is February. We start thinking about it in January, or talking about it a little bit. Then February we hit it hard, and then March start developing some kind of plan. What are we going to do this year? So what I think we should do at the engineering committee for February is what you're talking about is let's lay everything out like on a map that details what we've done. It actually, the map that Dave put up there, we need something more comprehensive than that. It's all there with the colors, but I've been looking at that for 4 years, so it means something to me. It doesn't to you, I know, because you can't figure it out. But I think we should start there, is, let's let's put a big map up
Very good.
and look at each area, what we've done, what we thought we were gonna do, what we didn't do. We also need to talk about drains. We haven't touched on that here yet today. There's a lot to do. And so I think your next meeting could just be purely almost planning. We
Okay.
can just give you a quick update. Hopefully these roads are gonna be finished, these projects.
Yeah.
And we can get on.
Right.
Moving along very nicely. They're gonna
Right.
be done in the meeting.
Well, my first engineering committee, I came in November and this was February. And January, there had been the same committee, both years. And so they're like in the January meeting, okay, 4A or whatever it is of Via Vaquero, that's gonna be it, And then they rolled out all the plans and everything at the February meeting. And one member, I can't remember which one, we'd spent an hour, looking at these plans on Via Vaquero 4B. And somebody said, I don't know if you guys have looked at the weather information for the next couple of days.
Yeah.
But all plans that we just discussed may be off in a couple of days. 2 nights later, that's when San Diego Creek and Via Vaquero washed away.
Mhm.
So we haven't even talked about 4B since that was 3 years ago. So anyway, okay, so we'll start working. Ron and Dave, do you understand? You heard all that, right?
We did.
Makes sense, right?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
So
good.
we'll put together a package. So you'll be getting a packet in advance of some things to look at
Mhm.
prior to the meeting, or we'll get together. We'll see.
Yeah.
And make that a comprehensive planning meeting and keep our fingers crossed that 2 nights later it doesn't change.
Don't even go there.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Any other comments before we move on, or questions? Okay, item G, traffic issues. Mr. Steve?
I'm gonna share my screen here
Okay.
and walk you through. Chuck, a lot of this is gonna be for your benefit so that you understand the kinds of variety of things that we do from the traffic perspective. So we tend to give an update on any county issues. In this case here, we've asked them to take a look at some signs on Duluth as an example. We have our changeable message sign and we move that around as we need it throughout the district. My role is to look at all speed limits, signing and striping and intersection visibility and those kinds of things and stuff like that. So anything to do with traffic related and studies and reports and data collection. We have several projects that are in progress right now. The first project was to look at stop signs at Los Gatos and Carancho and stop signs at La Cruz and Sandia Creek. This project involves getting volumes and delay and accidents and sight distance. And we evaluate all that and put it together and compare it to the state warrants and the recommendations that we give to you and the board. Currently, this is the request for stop signs shows that we have 2,800 plus vehicles on Sandia Creek with about 25% of those coming in the peak hour, 4 to 6 p.m. The sight distance is acceptable. The accident history, there hasn't been any reported in the last 12 months at the intersection. And so consequently, it doesn't necessarily meet any state warrants, but we're not bound by having to follow the state warrants if we don't want to. This has got an unusual, unique condition that you might want to consider. And that is that the freeway gets congested and Sandia Creek's an obvious bypass. You get a lot of new drivers that are not familiar with the Sandia Creek Road, with the area, the curves, et cetera, and they're trying to make up for lost time. And we know that there are gaps now in the peak hours, but that may further decrease as the roadway reopens and the volumes could increase. So there's the other request, and that's for stop signs at Carancho and Los Gatos. And again, it's got very low volumes, no delay, no sight distance issues, and no accident history. So again, it doesn't meet any criteria. We sampled the speeds out there and we realized that the speeds right at this area this is one of the longest, straightest stretches on Carancho. And the speeds get up to about 52 or so for 85% of the traffic drives at 52 or less. The recommendation that we're proposing is that we adopt a new speed limit of 40 miles per hour on this street and try to bring those upper end speeds down. And we have some recommendations for doing some striping near the mailboxes and that. So that's the first project. The second project we were requested to take a look at is speed limits along Carancho Via Vaquero and Via Santa Rosa. And that project is in process. We have sampled data. We've looked at accidents, unusual conditions. And we basically are at the point now where we need to put together the final report. And this is a little different because this one we do need to follow state standards. Otherwise, the courts won't support the enforcement of it. So we'll be bringing that hopefully to you next month. And the final project was we were asked to take a look at and count the before and after opening of the Sandia Creek. And so we did do that. We collected that data back in December, and we have now a before situation to compare everything to. Give you a little sneak peek of it. Sandia Creek on Avenida del Oro area there is almost 3,000 cars a day with, like I said, 25% of that traffic being in the 4 to 6 p.m. hours. Cameron at De Anza is taking about half that amount. But look at this. It's got 50% of its traffic is the 4 to 6 p.m. And then Sandia Creek right down at the county line, you see about 2,000 cars a day, where 50% of those 2,000 come through between 4 and 6 p.m. So that's our before data, and I'll answer any questions that you have.
Would you mind if we backed up? Do you have a moment?
Yeah,
Let's go back on these different projects you're doing.
okay.
In order to assure that we're safe as a public agency from litigation and well, primarily that, and to keep our drivers safe and this and that, we follow state guidelines, federal guidelines, and that's Steve LeBring's business. Okay, I mean, we could do this ourselves, and we used to, but now it's become, life's so litigious and everything that it's better to have an expert make recommendations. It's still up to the legislative body to do, make the final decision. But that's why we go through this process where when someone stands up and says, I want a stop sign, or I want a speed limit change, or, I want radar, whatever. We hand this now to Steve, who does a study, documents everything. In order to use radar, everything goes to the court. So when the judge is seeing a radar ticket case, he pulls it up on the screen and sees the work that Steve did. And if it doesn't jive with the judge, then he can throw it out or order us to change it, whatever. So anyway, that's why we go through this process. And so the progress right now is we had a request for a stop sign at Sandia Creek and La Cruz. That was one of the ones that was considered originally when we put the stop signs up a few years ago. So can we look at that one more time, Steve? Can you bring up the La Cruz stop sign data?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's this one here.
If we could just take a
Thank
look
you.
at this a little slower. What you found is that there's 3,000 vehicles on Sandia Creek, and we're assuming that those 3,000 cross that intersection, correct?
Correct.
La Cruz intersection. And that almost 600 cross in a 2-hour period in those 2 hours. Now it's 300 an hour. And if I'm sitting there on La Cruz trying to come out on Sandia Creek, 300 doesn't sound like a huge number until you divide it by 60, as in 60 minutes.
Mhm.
60 by 300, 7. And see how many vehicles?
Five,
Isn't that about every 7 seconds or something like that?
5 or 6 per minute.
So every 10 seconds,
Seconds.
a vehicle is going by in one direction or the other. So 20 seconds one way and 20 seconds the other. From the kind of comments I heard from the homeowners, the residents, that's their issue, is that you're taking your life into your hands when you're pulling out. We find that Steve finds here that the sight distance is acceptable pursuant to state recommendations. And we know there haven't been any accidents.
Mhm.
And you see this on the screen, accident history none. You hear how many people do we have to kill? Okay, this is precisely where it comes from, because when the citizens go to meetings and they see these things on the screen, like there were 2 killed, there were
Right.
4 accidents, this is where it comes from. Okay, because they've seen this before and they assume that you've got to have so many. You don't have to, and that's why this is there for your information purposes. But the fact that there's no accident history doesn't mean that you don't need a stop sign there, or anyway, I just kind of point that out. You're going to see this a lot,
Mhm.
over time. So the real key one is that the peak hour.
Yeah, along that line, is there a similar morning peak hour rush compared to similar to the evening or afternoon?
Steve, do we have the AM?
The AM? Yeah,
Yeah.
we do. It's not as much as this, but it's got 300 or 400 cars in the AM peak hours.
Okay, so it's
Like
less. You're
100,
just
like
using the
121
maximum.
hour and 170 the other, that kind of a thing.
And what would be the number that would, okay, we're 639. What would be an alarming number? 900, 1,000, 1,200?
Yeah, the delay is basically saying is that there's no safe gaps anymore. So, it takes about 7.5 seconds for the design driver to take a left-hand turn out of that intersection. Okay, so right now what you were describing was, with 600 plus cars, there's a car coming by about every 10 seconds or so. So do they come evenly exactly at 10? No, sometimes there'll be 2 or 3 cars, bumper to bumper, and then you might have a 20-second or 30-second gap, and then that's where the car takes out. But as that volume goes up, as you see, like you said, if it got up to 900 or 1,000 kind of a thing during those hours, then you'd have far less gaps. You'd only have 6-7 seconds between some of the gaps throughout the hour. And that's where the danger becomes, is that people start taking an unreasonable chance because they don't want to wait there for 2, 3, 4 minutes trying to find a gap. So they eventually pick what they think is the best gap, and that may not be right all the time.
Have we had a deputy monitor that for some period of time to see if there's any observations from traffic behavior?
Steve, did you hear that?
I heard something about the deputy observing. What was the rest of it?
I'm sorry, Steve. I'm wondering if we had a deputy observe that intersection for some period of time to see if in fact there is I'm sorry. I'm technically incompetent here. To see if there's a behavior pattern. As an example, from personal experience, I know that there are some rather sporty drivers along Sandia Creek at times. And averages may not describe the risk level.
Right.
So I'm wondering if perhaps a deputy has spent some time there and given us any feedback on what kind of behavior they see.
Yes, enforcement is one option, of course. Other things you can look at Sandia Creek and La Cruz, you have 3 lanes out there right now. You have westbound lane, you have an eastbound lane, and then you have a lane that we cross-hatched out that just became kind of a turnout. You could look at an option to restripe the road, and you could put the eastbound lane over in the turnout, the westbound lane where the eastbound lane is, and then you could create like a deceleration right turn only lane and an acceleration right turn out lane kind of a thing. That would help, for traffic that's, trying to get in and get out in at least one of the directions and that, but you still have the issue of them having to cross the traffic that's coming, in both directions, when they want to make
Right.
a turn. So there's a lot of issues. And then, like I said, this is really, the other thing to consider is that even if it doesn't meet the state warrants per se, you have the ability to make an engineering judgment or look at conditions that may be unique to this intersection. Sandia Creek is unique to this whole district above and beyond anything else in the community. It's not like you say, well, if we put a stop sign on Sandia Creek at La Cruz, then we have to put one over here, and here because they're the same. No, they're not the same. Vaquero carries a couple hundred cars a day. Sandia Creek's carrying 3,000. Those aren't the same. So, that's where you have other situations that you can look at and see, are there enough unique situations here that, this makes more sense,
Yeah, my comment about the deputy wasn't really aimed at enforcement as much as just an observation and feedback so that
Okay.
we had a feel for the nature of the traffic through there. And perhaps the right way to do that is not with a deputy, but rather some other observer.
Well, I think over the past 3 or 4 years, there have been a lot of observation, which really led to the using stop controls, which hadn't been used before. It was wide open. And what you've got is our residential traffic tends to drive at a reasonable speed. And you've got the cut-through traffic that tends to drive, or some tend to drive at a highly unreasonable speed. And you never know who's coming, whether, which of the two it is. And I think when we went through months and months of deciding whether to do this stop sign program, that seemed to be, I heard the same comments from the people on La Cruz the other night that we heard before. And the one thing that seemed to happen when the stop signs went up every mile or so is it seemed to slow the transient drivers down because they just didn't have enough room to get up speed. So I think that we could do observation there, but I think we heard, it's the same song as 30 years ago. That's their concern is when they pull out and you've got somebody driving 40 miles an hour coming up behind them after they've made their turn, it's not threatening to them. But when they pull out and 3 seconds, behind them is some guy get off work doing 65 and comes right up behind them, that's their concern. And so I guess it doesn't meet the technical warrants, but it does meet somewhat the community standard that you've set. And like I said, when I heard about La Cruz, I'm not surprised because it was one that was on the
On the
original
original, yes,
consideration.
yeah.
And I'd seen some of the numbers, and I kind of hoped the numbers would have declined more with the washout and closure. So I was kind of surprised at some of these numbers right now. I really thought they would be
Be
less.
lower, yeah, I agree.
So, I guess my comment to you too, you're the decision maker, but, I'm kind of inclined to think that La Cruz more or less means the same standard as the ones before.
Mhm.
That 639 in 2 hours. That's a lot of traffic
Yes,
for a residential area.
yes.
And if these people are flying like they are in San Diego Creek, I mean, even our residents are,
True.
but, I can see why, if I lived there, I'd probably find it scary to
Right.
pull out. And even 300 in the morning.
Mhm.
You know, trying to get to work, people, you know, are trying to get to Oceanside to work. And I don't know, and I'm a little surprised to the accident, you know, that there hasn't been at least a fender bender or something down there, but,
No,
so I
this-
don't know, that's why, our system, leaves it to you, the resident or the citizens of the community to make the hard judgment.
Mhm.
And you don't have to make it now, but, I guess, is this ready, Steve, to go on a board agenda? We said that you'd study it, and you've obviously studied it. The committee might want more study. We may want to have Perez comment or look at it. I suspect Perez knows it pretty darn well anyways, you know, he's out there all the time. I don't know, is this ready to take to the board and have people come down and say their piece about what they think? Where are we, Steve?
It's ready to go. I mean, this is really the last step, is that if the engineering committee is making a recommendation, then we can present that to the board at their next meeting and say, here's the study, here's the recommendation, here's the criteria that we looked at. This is why we think it makes sense, or what to look at. Or if it's a denial, then we say, you know, this is why we're denying it. We're looking at this, or this, whether that be enforcement or other things. And, you know, but yeah, we're at
Steve is the designer that's been spending the major amount of time on looking at the data and understanding the problems. Are there any negatives that you see to putting that up?
I don't see in this case here any real negatives, because as I'm saying, this is a unique street. So when you do something like this along the unique street and you're taking those unique conditions into consideration, you're not being a proponent of saying, oh, by the way, any old place in town, we can just do this at, you know, we're trying to follow the criteria as closely as we can. And just a heads up, the 4 stop signs that we did 3 years ago all had sight distance issues. So that was why the selection for those was implemented, because they were lacking in sight distance for the speeds that were on the road. And so we took that into consideration, and that's how we selected the 4. Okay, so but this one here, like I said, the unique condition here would just be, you know, is that this peak hour situation is pretty heavy, and the gaps are few and far between. So you won't have that if you get a request to do this. And I'm just making this up, any old street, Vaquero at, you know, Yerba or something like that. You know, hey, we want a stop sign like they got. Well, you got 150 cars or something on Vaquero, and you've got, you know, 12 cars on Yerba, and they don't have that condition that you have here. You don't, Vaquero's not a cut-through street like the freeway uses as a bypass, you know, that kind of, so you don't have these conditions and that. So that's why when you do this, you apply the warrants, but the warrants are basically guidelines that you try to follow to promote consistency and to promote compliance. You put something in that's unreasonable, people won't comply with it. So you have to do something in that. And I think what Jim's trying to say is that, you know, this one kind of fits the criteria of being reasonable too.
Yeah.
I guess one last question, when the signs were put up, most recently in the past, there was a group that went up all at one time. And it, of course, takes a while for the community to become familiar with any new signage and not create an issue by, one driver thinking someone's stopping and the other driver not realizing the need to.
Right.
Is there any additional signage that we're considering that should go along with this at the same time so that we reduce the number of learning curves for the community to become familiar with it if we were to put this in?
Yes, that's where, like stop ahead signs come in place. That's where you can put the changeable message board out and say that there's a, new stop sign ahead, starting this date, that kind of stuff, like I advertise it, do all that. Some people put flags or flashers on the signs for the first week or two to kind of catch people's attention, not just at daytime, but at nighttime. So yeah, there are a lot of traffic techniques that you can apply to make it.
Right, I guess what I was asking is, are we considering other intersections that are closely enough connected to this that it makes sense to do them as a group as opposed to individually? To make that a little simpler, perhaps, should we wait on this for a couple of months because we're going to do another one in 3 months? Or is this the only one that we're really considering to be a fairly solid recommendation now?
This is the only one that we received a request for, and I don't see anything else along the Sandia Creek, path that would need anything that would even, be close to this one,
Well, I guess with the conversation that we've had, I'd be prepared to make a recommendation that we go forward with the board.
I concur.
Okay.
Mhm.
One thing that didn't come up, I just thought of it. When they were here, I was looking at a map. La Cruz has a lot of residences down there.
Yes.
Because that road goes clear to the golf course, as I remember.
Yeah, well, remember, Maureen and her husband, Don.
Yeah.
Slump, they're the primary vocal
Right,
individuals for the
right.
community right there. Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
other streets, they maybe have, 10 homes on them or whatever. This one, I didn't count the homes, but just looking at the aerial, there's a lot of,
Mhm.
traffic generated up La Cruz to that intersection, so.
Mhm.
And I would assume, and like the people, there's a few people I've encountered there, and they tend to be workers.
Mhm.
So they're, doing the 8 o'clock, 7:30, trying to get out, and they're
Yeah.
lined up. So I guess I can kind of understand that it's a little bit more unique than a lot of our other streets that
Right.
feed onto Sandia.
And I think as a result of the previous work that we've done, and because like we said, La Cruz was on there when we were originally looking at all the new signage and speed limits and so forth, that they were in that mix. And now we're here at this particular time where I think its uniqueness definitely is present right here in terms of the presentation. And you certainly will get some good points also with the community because it's something that is still on their minds, obviously.
Mhm.
So yeah, definitely would support this one moving forward.
And
So
Debbie,
Steve, can you package this up with the presentation then? That you can then turn the presentation over to the committee and let them present it to the board?
have the committee presented to the board?
Well, the usual, they'll probably make the first report after yours. So you make the
Okay.
presentation and then
And then we'll,
then the committee can make their comments about what they think.
Sounds good.
okay,
Okay. And then can we contrast, let's go to the next one, the next request for the stop sign at Los Gatos and Carancho.
Concho.
Now, I think one thing that we came up where we remembered or considered in the last month is there's a pretty active, large postal box
The kiosk.
there. And so we wonder how much the fact that these residents are going to this postal box, every other day or whatever. So they're somewhat being impacted by traffic issues or speed issues or whatever. And so when Steve looked at it, it really doesn't meet the warrants, and in comparison to what we've just been discussing, the volumes are not even close. And Carancho is not carrying the kind of traffic or the cut throughs. Just a lot of the items that were on the list that you've discussed in the last half hour about the other is not present here. So while we understand that there may be frustrations by our residents at speeds and some of the things they see out there, unfortunately, this doesn't match the warrants.
Right.
And it doesn't have the special conditions that Sandia has. So I think Steve has come up with something to try to address some of the issues, including some additional striping to provide a little more safety for the residents going to the mailboxes. So I'm assuming if you were to agree with Mr. LeBring and he were to make this report also at the meeting next week, the folks that are asking for this are going to go away disappointed. Now, hopefully they're going to like the striping. They're going to like the fact we're the speed limit. And then in terms of the deputy, if we adopt this new speed limit, and it's going to take a few meetings to make that happen, you can't do that at just one time. Anyway, we're going to have to talk about our law enforcement staffing and make sure that he and CHP can re-educate the drivers out there.
Right.
So anyway, this is also I'm really just going through all the steps here because I'm a new member. Each time you take these actions, it kind of sets the dominoes falling, and what we need to do to make it safe, make it work,
Right.
so that just because you took an action doesn't mean that we just forget about it, because otherwise it won't work. So it's the follow through's got to be there too. So, but the folks here will probably be unhappy because some I think are convinced that they need the four-way stop. And anyway, it's not, I don't know what you guys all shut up. You guys have to decide whether you agree with Mr. LeBring here, his recommendation.
What is the current speed limit there, Steve?
There is no posted speed limit.
There isn't?
No. Most of your streets in your district have no posted speed limit.
So that's 55.
55?
Or whatever the safe speed is for the conditions that are prevalent. Because, out there, the key out here is, and we'll be bringing this recommendation to you at your next meeting. We're seeing that this is probably a street that's going to come in at right around 40 miles per hour. You have a lot of 25 and 30 mile an hour curves. There's no reason to get up to going 50 or 55 and then have to jam on the brakes to go around a 25 mile an hour curve and stuff like that. So you look at kind of the average speeds out there with the straight sections and the curve sections, and it comes out to a 40 is a good number. That's kind of right in the middle there. So that's what we're looking to try to propose and get adopted. And that will take out, with enforcement, even if they enforce at 10 miles over, that'll take out 15% or more of the traffic right there to have to hit the brakes and get under that limit, or they're going to get a citation, And that's what I think the biggest thing is they're concerned about is the speed, because this is the longest, straightest stretch. So it's where you can actually go a little bit faster.
The mailbox facility that's located at that intersection, is the entrance and exits from that to both streets, or only
No.
to one?
It's the entrances and exit both come out onto Carancho, so. And that could be another option to look at is if we were able to maybe punch through a little connection to Los Gatos, then you could come out and be coming out more at a 90-degree angle versus trying to accelerate, you know.
Uh-huh. I mean, obviously, the cross street with the stop sign has a different profile than coming out of a relatively unmarked. I mean, even though the population will know that that's there, it's not necessarily a marked intersection or a one that drivers may be paying attention to.
Yeah, there are advanced signs up though that say there is an intersection ahead. There are advanced signs up that say slow to 30 in preparation for it. There is a 30-mile-an-hour curve just south of the intersection. So the intersection is fairly well, you know, visible and that to the drivers that are approaching. But like so many things, you know, when people drive streets for years after year, they kind of ignore and miss all that, you know. They drive with the radar on or the you know, the blinders on.
So I guess what you're presenting us here is pretty much the factual situation that exists there. With your experience of looking at this, what's your recommendation?
This would be one I would recommend not to install a stop sign. I would first try doing some.
But
shipping
you would recommend the speed limit.
speed limit and see if we can, you know, because I think that's the issue that's driving the stop sign is the concern about the speeds. So
Yeah.
let's address the speeds with you know, speed control and monitoring by the police department and not trying to put a stop sign in, you know.
Well, I agree with Jim that the taking action on one request and not on another is kind of like lighting a fuse. And
Can be.
we probably ought to do both at the same
Right.
time.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I concur.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I one comment Steve just made. The comments I'm hearing are about the speeds. And I think they think that putting that one, I mean, that's like a raceway right now,
Right.
straight raceway. And if we try to, at the 3/4 mark, put a stop sign, I think it came up earlier, people will blow the stop sign, and that's more dangerous than anything we
Right.
could do.
Well, at least initially, that's likely to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the speeder is this attitude thing. It's kind of like the mask and mandates and anything. If the public's not into it, they're not gonna do it. And I mean, they've studied that for years and years. I learned that in public administration school, you know, just because, you know, you like the law, the public's got to like the law. So I think, yeah, putting this with the concerns are that we're hearing is the speed.
Mhm.
It has nothing to do with stopping.
Yeah.
And I think when they hear that, I think they'll go along. Because I think if we just said, nope, sorry, no stop sign,
Right.
they would say, well, you're not being fair to me or whatever. But I think maybe they're gonna say, yeah, you're right. I'm
Yeah.
really upset about the speed.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
I wanted to point out to Mr. Bowman here, that 85th percent. I don't know if he knows about that, and I'll take just a second to explain it. Every state has different, and Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the way it was taught to me. Every state, when radar came into being, it was like the truckers associations all fought it, you know, and radar was considered, you know, a crummy thing to do to us drivers or whatever, and inaccurate and like a speed trap kind of thing. So each state developed protocols for how you could write a ticket, a legal, fair, enforceable ticket, citation, that the courts would uphold. So in California, they developed the 85th percentile rule. And what that means is that a traffic engineer like Steve has to go out in an unmarked car with a radar gun, not flashing lights, not doing anything to distort the numbers. And he has to take 100 samples. And they plot them on a chart of what the speeds are. And at the 85th one, that's where they draw the line. And then I believe they can go up or down within that 5-mile range that 85th percentile is at. And those reports are given to the court. So when the board here approves a speed limit and they intend to use radar, which we use radar, okay, Steve has to present a certified report to the court. The speed survey, I think it's called. Steve, finish here. But and they only last for like 5 years, and judges use them. And now with electronics, they pull them up. According to Sam, they look at like the Duluth study, the speed study. Used to be in books, and they'd ask the clerk to go get the book. Now they just pull them up. And if they don't like the study or what they see or whatever, they'll throw the ticket out. So, and you know, like lawyers and people who understand how it works, they challenge based on the bad study, stuff like that. A lot of judges, so I've been told, I haven't seen it, but some judges, they get irritated. They don't want to figure it out. They just throw it out. All right, I don't want to look it up. Steve, did I do an okay job on that?
Yeah, two things. It's every 7 years. And secondly, the 85th percentile is the speed that they determine that the public that drives reasonably and safe for the conditions of the road, that 85% of the public will use the road conditions and everything into account when selecting a speed. But the other 15% that's above that, they're determined to be basically aggressive drivers who have no disregard or no regard for other people's safety and disregard the rules. And that, so that's why the enforcement and the law is usually setting it around that 85th percentile, saying that should capture all the reasonable people to be safe and under the limit. And the ones that are above that are the ones that need to be targeted. You know?
So your goal is to bring the 85th percentile down to the speed limit, the safe and reasonable speed that you would put on a sign. I don't know if I said that well.
Correct.
But what the motivation, of course, for changing a speed limit is to adjust the speed.
With
What's
the
the
idea that
relationship of the speed limit sign to the 85th percentile speed?
right, in order to bring any change, you have to have education through enforcement. And if you can't get the ticket to hold or stick, then it won't do anything to bring the speeds down. That word will get around too quickly that it's not enforceable, and then people go back to their old habits. If they know they have it subject to getting a $300, $400, $500 ticket, as well as, you know, have a point on their record of their insurance for the next 3 years and a $400 or $500 a year increase, that becomes a $2,000 mistake. And out on Carancho, you know, in that area, there's going to be a lot of people are going to think like, well, there's nobody out here working this, you know, kind of thing. But they'll be surprised when they find out, you know, it can be enforced. So you should have a good chance to bring that speed down. And that's the whole goal.
Okay, to make sure I understand, what speed limit would you, right now, that's an unmarked road, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
it's equivalent to 55.
Or equivalent to
Yeah.
55 speed limit. What's your recommendation for the speed limit in that?
I'm
area.
looking at the data, and we're thinking that 40 is going to be the number
Yeah.
for that section there.
Okay,
That there's a lot of 30, like I said, a lot of 30-mile-an-hour curves, 35-mile-an-hour curves, some 25-mile-an-hour curves. And so if we keep them at 40, then they only have to slow down 5 or maybe 10 for a few of the curves. But having them come through 45, 50-ish, that's a 20 or 25 mile an hour differential to try to get around the curves. That's not the safest thing we can do.
Right.
But we won't be able to use radar though.
No, Jim, I think we can. I think we can blend this was sampled, just so you know, was only taken just to get an indication. So when the residents say, well, they're going a lot faster at Los Gatos than the other places you sampled. And I wanted to have that data to
Oh,
show
I see. I
we
see.
captured here, but the majority of the road, the 85th percentile is much lower.
Okay.
Okay. So as a group, our recommendation would be, Steve, prepare that to present at the next board
Board
meeting as well.
meeting, yeah, next week, correct.
Well,
Okay, Mr. Steve?
I can certainly present this as our proposed recommendations, but we won't have the ordinance or the supporting data to go to the courts ready by next week.
Yeah,
That
right.
takes a lot longer to put all that together. So, but that's, it can be done as, here's what the recommendation, if you're good with like this, more or less of a verbal report, then, and you all agree to it, then we can certainly then do the report and bring the report with the ordinance at the following meeting, or we can adopt the ordinance at this meeting, and then just it's a two-step process. You adopt it at one meeting, then you have a second reading, and in between those two readings, we can finalize the written court documents. So, Jim, however you'd want to.
Actually, no, technically you can't. And this going to the court, it can't change. So your final has to be there for first reading,
Okay,
technically.
so
So if this
I
were
know
presented at the next-
others do it differently.
let's do this. Let's set the.
Yeah, I would say we've got time. Just do it right. Put it in the February meeting.
Okay, very good.
Okay,
Okay, do we want to move to the other items?
yes, okay, I think we're done with this item here.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the field crew report, Steve.
Yeah. So again, Chuck, for your benefit, just to give you some of the idea, this is what the field crew does. So I'll just go over this kind of quickly, but we take care of all the graded shoulders. We're road department, so we have to take care of the shoulders and make sure the weeds and stuff are taken care of. We take care of the growth that grows into the roadway and trim it back off of that. We have 700 drains that we have to clear and keep flowing. We have streets that get potholes and patching and striping and signing and things of that nature. So we have to take care of that. This is an example of when we get a larger project, we have to rent equipment to come in and take care of the grading and the removals. We also are responsible for trash, graffiti, anything that's thrown alongside of the roads. We take care of our office and we take care of our vehicles. This is another kind of thing that happens. People decide to leave these nice trailers, not for sale, but for free. And we have to have them towed away. We work with the homeowners to help us trim a lot of the roads, as in this case here, we had them trim 26 palm trees. So we didn't have to do it. And then we get things like this where we have potholes where we go out and fix the pothole, but if it becomes much bigger, then we may have to put together a small bid or something like that for a contractor to come in. We also do emergency call outs for trees that fall. After the rains, we had 2 trees that fell that blocked traffic. So we got to have our crews respond and do stuff like that. So that kind of gives you the ongoing activity. We got a new thing popped up here. The fruit people and avocado people, the owners or whatever are dumping their bins out on the street, and we're trying to get the bin companies the avocado companies to come pick them up and that. So any that don't get picked up will be smashing and tossing. We end up with water leaks occasionally, so we notified the Rancho Water District for follow-up and repairs. And then we want to talk to you tonight just briefly about a proposal that we want to look at getting is a skid steer, which is a little bobcat. And this is what we call a Swiss Army knife. It's a powerful tool that can get into places that the big equipment can't. It would basically substitute for all of these single-use machines that we have. the cost of the skid steer is $74,000. And when you add on the extras that we want to get, the backhoe, the mower, the sweeper, all that kind of stuff, it runs it up to about $88,000 total. But here's the good news. The skid steer would save us from renting a skid steer every year because we have to do it every year. We go to clean the drains. Also save us on the maintenance and the tires that we spend on the other equipment that we use now for other reasons that the skid steer would replace. And we have in contracting out for tree trimming, we could realize about a $58,000 savings on the budget if the skid steer could do the tree trimming that we would normally contract out. So you're looking at almost a $70,000 annual savings that this piece of equipment could do, which you see over 10 years. It's pretty substantial. So that's the last bit of information that we wanted to bring to you. And if you guys are in support of that, then that would be great to have that.
Is that something that you're preparing to make a proposal on at some point to acquire?
Uh,
The skid steer?
Yeah, the history on it is we've been talking about it for about a year.
Yeah.
When Dustin came, he came from the private sector. And it was really his suggestion that there was a lot better piece of equipment for the kinds of things we do. And so we've been renting this equipment for a year now for various jobs, and it really is proving itself to be very valuable because it is like a Swiss Army knife. You just put a different
Right.
attachment on it. And the tree trimming attachment, Debbie, did you see that video? It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It just mulches everything up. Just boom, that tree's gone. So anyway, we've been, practicing and testing with it for about the last year. And so far, I'm convinced. And we do have easily about 50, 60,000, I believe, in the budget that we put in for additional equipment, but we haven't purchased anything in quite a while. So that kind of accumulates in that fund. So the funds are there, budgeted funds. We don't purchase a lot of major equipment. I think the last one was a new tractor three years ago, something like that. But I think we've convinced ourselves that something like this would be a benefit. So I think when we were making up the agenda today, Steve and I were talking about last week, and we thought, well, okay, I think we're getting to where we want to make this recommendation. So we thought we would bring it up to you. We should probably, unless you were to say, no, we don't want that. Perhaps next week I could talk to the finance committee. If you were to say, yeah, we're okay with proceeding. I'm not saying we're buying this thing. And then, so I talk to you first. If you have no objection, then we'll take it to finance and see, where the money lies and what their comments are. And then perhaps in the next month, we can bring it back if everything is a green light. And maybe even get some prices, because these are just, off
Sure,
the shelf.
that's kind of an initial look. Just as a recommendation, and by the way, I'm very pro owner versus renter. I believe that if you're using equipment, well, as my father used to say, it takes a very wealthy person to buy a cheap tool because you have to keep buying it over and over again.
Yeah.
And so I try to follow the path of get good stuff, take care of it, use it. But in the initial financial look, if I were on the financial committee, I'd want you to go back and take another look at what the real maintenance is going to be on that, because owning some equipment myself, I know buying it is not a maintenance-free option. It's not a BMW.
Right.
So including the maintenance cost for some equipment, if I understood the table correctly, and ignoring that for the other piece of equipment, maintenance is going to be there on anything you own.
Right.
Tools all have a usable life, and so need to be depreciated out at a reasonable rate, that sort of thing. So I just ask that we look at a little deeper in the financial side of it to make sure that it really does come out to be within something that we maintain in a budget.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
I agree.
Steve, you're monitoring this?
I took all those notes down, yes.
Okay, okay. So we can, Steve and I will talk some more tomorrow or
Yeah.
this week. And then, I'll talk with finance and then we'll do some more. If they say that they have no problem with it, then, we'll start digging a little deeper and then we'll have a more detailed discussion.
Yeah.
I'm not putting you on the hook that we need to have this yesterday. It's,
Right.
You know, we've been working on this a year, so.
Right.
When we get there, we get there.
Okay,
So,
sounds good. Okay, thank you, Steve, for all
Thank you,
the
everybody.
good information. Okay, Jen.
Well, aye, county issues. No comment.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a county day. I spent my whole day in my ear
Yes,
trying to listen to all of it. But boy, folks from Duluth really, they
Came
should be
through.
proud of themselves.
Everybody ought to be happy right now.
They
Yeah,
should be,
they should be.
yeah.
So my
But you
only
know-
question is, there's no appeal or
No.
anything of that. Okay, I just want to make sure in comparison to the gate situation, with the county there and the planning and
This is the
everything.
Board of Supervisors,
Right,
so it's
right.
final,
So, yeah,
like the
okay,
Supreme Court.
okay.
Now, I've had a number of questions about, well, why is this coming back February 12th or whatever? What they did today is they held a public hearing, and this is all under state law.
Mhm.
You have to follow all the procedures, okay, to provide due process with what Kevin Jeffries talked a little bit about.
Mhm.
That they can't just do what they want and make a decision and, whatever. So what they did is they noticed everything, and you remember at the beginning, the clerk talked about this was published on this day in this newspaper, and so many people got notices and that's all straight out of state law. They have to do it that way.
Right.
And then they opened the public hearing, they had the staff report. Then they opened the public hearing, they had to explain that the applicant, because he has property rights, he gets the first, and he gets a 10-minute presentation,
Mhm.
okay, because it's his property, he's making the request.
Mhm.
And then that they would take everyone else that wanted to speak, and then at the end, he got 5 minutes. And then they said, okay, how do you wish to proceed? And they said, we want, and what that meant is the word, he kind of looked around, we want to debate this now instead of putting it off, which meant that he closed the public hearing. Now, that's an important thing, what he said, I closed the public hearing. What that means is now it's up to the deciders only. It's their time, okay?
Right.
And so they talked, and Kevin Jeffries made a motion to deny. And there was a second, okay? And then they discussed the motion, and then they voted. Now, the motion, they had him rephrase the motion at the end, which now, because the staff, being primarily the attorney that was at the meeting representing the board,
Mhm.
needed to know, where are you guys going? Okay, I have to do the legal work now. And so he said, okay, the motion second, and then we'll have a vote, but the motion should be to direct me, county council, to prepare the appropriate resolution with the findings of fact, and I've taken all the statements you guys made of the reason that you're voting no. And now voted, and no, 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 no. So now he'll come back with a resolution, and if they change their mind, which they could do, but they don't, okay? They read all the things that they all said, well, why they were denying it. They would have to go through the process all over again. So they'd have to republish it in the newspaper. They'd have to notify everybody they notified.
Sure.
And it would be a reopening of the whole thing from beginning to end.
Mhm.
So are they gonna vote that, change their vote? No. Because it would be so much work and cost and expense and.
Well, the public presentation is so powerful, it would be very difficult.
I think they
So they're gonna take those powerful statements, and you're gonna find those in the resolution. They say, for this reason, we are voting to not allow you to build this project. And it's I. And
That's it. Yeah.
it's over now. Now, as far as land use law, they can come back after a year. Okay, because with land use, it's pretty significant. People want to do this. They're not messing around, whether it be a room addition to their house or a pool in their backyard or whatever. If you get turned down, you have to wait a year.
So he can come back
A
again.
year and a day in California, you're back. But otherwise, they would just stand in line and just keep taking out permit applications, over
Right.
and over until they
Right.
got the answer they wanted.
Mhm.
So it's a year. Because in the olden days, they didn't have that, and they've standardized it now. Because people would just do that. If they get turned down, just, okay, here we go, especially for smaller cost items, like a room addition or something
Right.
like that. You just keep a file until you got the right answer.
Okay, yeah.
So they could come back, but something of this magnitude, I doubt it, because,
Unless some of the fundamentals of the arguments
right,
change,
Mhm.
then the outcome would most certainly be the same. I
Right.
think.
I
Yeah.
doubt very much if our people here would change their mind. They spent too much time and money and, so, yeah, good group of people. So anyhow, well, good.
so the very last thing I just wanted to say, and I'll probably say this at the board meeting. Steve is our traffic engineer. Steve works for Wildan, okay? And Steve has been working with us on and off since the Sandia Creek. He's the one who kind of unraveled all that mess for us. Stop signs and all the other mitigation measures. But when our road superintendent left, Keith, a year and a half ago, there were a lot of changes that were being talked about being made to the field services operation and all. Because it's kind of just rocked along for 40 years or whatever. And so we decided to, rather than just fill that position in a big hurry, to sit back, look at everything. And since Steve had run traffic crews, primarily street lights and traffic signals and stuff like that, he had familiarity with crew operations. So he volunteered and said, I'd be happy to help out for a while and just kind of oversee and help you understand how that operation works. And so anyway, I announced at the meeting on the 3rd of December that someone had turned us in because, I don't know, some violation of something, which I won't get into, but we were exonerated from that. So basically Steve's worked for now almost a year and a half, just kind of more or less overseeing that operation and trying to fine tune it here and there, look at the how the existing staff works and what alternatives they want to look at. He and I have been working on that. So I'm going to be finalizing that this month.
Okay,
And CalPERS understands that, we brought in somebody, his intention was never to be our field services director or whatever. He's retired. So anyway, I'm going to be wrapping this up in the next month or so. I'm coming to you with, what the new plan can be for the future. So anyway, I'm just kind of bringing that again, just letting you know we're working on it. So,
okay, good.
and I'll be talking, to the board and all. So
Okay, terrific. Very good.
it's in the works.
Okay, well, everybody, thank you for your time. Good discussions today. And I look forward to seeing everybody next week. And so this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Are we closed? Okay.
Oh, no, this is-
Sorry for talking so much, Chuck.
Oh,
but
no, well, I feel
Yeah.
like I slowed everything down today,
No,
but
but
I'm
when
just
I
getting on
think of
board.
historical
Oh, yeah,
things that you wouldn't know,
Yeah,
that's why I keep I'll quit peppering you so much. but,
Right.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, no, he doesn't know that he wasn't here, so, anyway.
Well, hopefully we'll get to the point where one of the corporations that I've worked with for some time had a management philosophy. The managers were responsible for reviewing a plan prepared by whoever was going to do the work. And the principal questions were, are you on schedule? If no, why? And then how can I help?
There you go.
And that seemed to work very well in that environment, and I think it might here too.
Yeah, it's somewhere, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Good
it's
program
changed a
management.
lot, with the boards that we have now.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying better or worse, it's just, more along the lines of what you're talking about.
Right.
And holding people accountable. I'm not sure that, I think, prior boards, and I'm not talking about just the most recent ones, but they're just the things I've seen in the past. I don't think they expected as much as they could have expected by the people they were paid. You know,
Mhm.
it's just like.
Yeah.
I don't know, just,
Yeah.
I think
No,
like, you know,
No, overall, the group has come a very long way. So,
yeah.
because I used to sit on that other side over there. We would bitch to this gentleman over here that we need stop signs, we need
Yeah.
speed limits, remember?
Yeah, that was my first meeting.
Uh-huh, it was.
And how
Well,
did
we just,
And how did I do?
you did great. That's why
Okay.
you're still here today.
Yeah.
You did great. You did your job, irrespective of what was happening up here. You did your job.
I was told there's gonna be an angry crowd, the place is gonna be filled, and it was. And I was like, so that's okay.
But I mean, but we got legitimacy as residents, we got legitimacy back in terms of you going out, you heard what we had to say, you went out there, you did your work, you did your studies, you came back. And we're like, wow,